So I'm Annie Adachi, and then I'm part of this group, or the first group. So over the course of the semester, my fellow team members and I have worked on our podcast titled The Evolution of Chinese Restaurants in America. So in our podcast, we explore how Chinese restaurants have evolved in America from the original Cantonese chop suey houses to the diverse array of Chinese restaurants that we see today. So we were very fortunate to be able to interview Dr. Raymond Chong, who has written extensively about Chinese chop suey restaurants in America and his family's own story in the restaurant industry. Through his interview, we learned about his family's restaurant, the Far East Cafe that used to be in Little Tokyo, Los Angeles, the formation of many original chop suey houses, their roles in the community, and their eventual decline. Additionally, we were also able to interview Mr. Steve Wong, a Bay Area leader in the Chinese American community, who also comes from a family of restaurant workers. So in that interview, we learned about Chinese restaurants today and how they're currently being impacted by the pandemic and how community members can support Chinese restaurant workers moving forward. So overall, from both Dr. Chong and Steve Wong, we were able to learn about the integral role Chinese restaurants play in Chinese American and broader Asian American communities. And also how Chinese food has always been dynamic to fit the context of America.
Chop suey was in 1884 when a gentleman named Wong Fu, a Mandarin, in a newspaper, talked about what chop suey was at that time. Little pieces of dishes of meats, vegetables mixed in together in a sauce. And he was the first known written representation of what is now known as chop suey in 1884. And the reason why chop suey became a big way of surviving as a business in America was the Chinese Exclusion Act. It forced Chinese not just to become laborers, because laborers were excluded to immigrate to America in 1882. In order to find a way to travel back and from America to China and back, and to bring your family, you had to be a merchant class. And the easiest path to be a merchant was the classic old story: laundries, stores, and restaurants, which means chop suey. And I'll give you a big picture. In 1940, in Little Tokyo, Los Angeles, there were 10 chop suey cafes. They're all gone now. But in 1940, there were 10 chop suey cafes. Fast forward in 1965, in New Chinatown, Los Angeles, there were 31 chop suey cafes. And that was before the onset of the 1965 Immigration and Nationality Act, where it ended the quotas against the Chinese, and brought more other Chinese in beyond chop suey. It became Sichuan, Hunan, Angwan, all the other cuisines. But up to 1965, that was the pinnacle of chop suey in America, up to 1965.
Our second clip is from our interview with Mr. Steve Wong. In response to the question of what should listeners and students who are listening to this podcast take away as they begin their work in the community.
And so the restaurant trade is going to still have a significant impact on these newly arrived immigrants in terms of their job employment. So in that regard, there will always be things that can be done in around restaurant workers, for instance, in the Chinese communities. But see, unfortunately, once again, a lot of them are like mom and pop type of outfits. They don't employ a whole lot of workers, but they do employ enough because of the sheer number of Chinese, restaurants or takeout places. Because like in New York, for instance, a lot of the Chinese immigrant population there is from Fujian province, and they're still coming in one way or another. And they make up a big bulk of the Chinese restaurants and the workers. And that, for whatever reason, because of once again, you come into this country, you have very little language skills, and you go to jobs that are where you can at least have a job, even though low wage jobs that will employ these people. But the East Coast is a little bit different in that people who actually live in New York will work as far away as Florida or up in Maine. And a lot of that has, dried up as well because of the pandemic in terms of the ability to work. And so you're going to have a lot of unemployed Chinese workers right now who are part of the restaurant trade. So I can see, in the future, organizing around those type of things can be, a thing that the community can center around.
This has been our podcast, The Evolution of Chinese Restaurants in America. Overall, we were able to learn about how Chinese restaurants originated and progressed over time in America. Most importantly, from Dr. Chong and Steve Wong, we heard about how Chinese restaurants give life to the community. They provide spaces for gatherings. Their food brings about a sense of nostalgia in customers. And their legacies can be seen today in the relationships, friendships, and sense of community in Chinese American communities, Asian American communities, and beyond.